The crystal chandeliers sparkled like diamonds above the crowd of wealthy guests. Everyone was dressed in their finest clothes, sipping expensive wine and talking about their latest business deals. This was the kind of party where a single watch could cost more than most people made in a year. Alexander Cross stood near the grand staircase, looking down at his guests with satisfaction. He had built his tech empire from nothing, and now at 32 he was one of the richest men in the city. Tonight's charity gala was supposed to raise money for local schools, but if he was being honest, it was really about showing off his massive mansion and reminding everyone just how successful he was. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander called out, his voice carrying across the marble-floored ballroom. The conversation slowly died down as people turned to look at him. He loved moments like this, when all eyes were on him. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he continued, adjusting his expensive suit jacket. "Your generous donations will help children in our community get a better education." Polite applause filled the room. Alexander smiled, but inside he was getting impatient. Where was the pianist he had hired? The man was supposed to start playing an hour ago. Just then, his assistant hurried over and whispered in his ear. Alexander's face darkened. The pianist had called in sick at the last minute. No replacement could be found on such short notice. For most people, this would be embarrassing, but Alexander never liked to admit defeat, especially not in front of his wealthy friends and business partners. "Well, it seems our entertainment for the evening has run into a small problem," he announced to the crowd, his voice still confident. "Our pianist won't be able to join us tonight." Some guests looked disappointed. Others just shrugged and went back to their conversations. But Alexander wasn't done. An idea was forming in his head. The kind of idea that came from too much wine and too much pride. "You know what?" he said, his voice getting louder. "I have a better idea. Music is supposed to touch the soul, right? So let's make this interesting." He walked over to the beautiful black grand piano that sat in the corner of the room like a sleeping giant. Running his hand along its polished surface, he turned back to face his guests. "Here's my challenge," Alexander said, grinning in a way that made him look more like a predator than a host. "Anyone who can sit at this piano and play something truly beautiful, something that moves us all, I'll marry them on the spot." The crowd laughed nervously. Some people thought he was joking. Others knew Alexander well enough to realize he probably meant it. "Come on," he continued, spreading his arms wide. "Surely someone here has hidden musical talent. What do you say? Any takers?" The guests looked around at each other, but nobody moved toward the piano. These were business people, lawyers, and socialites. They were used to buying art, not creating. Alexander's eyes swept across the room, enjoying the uncomfortable silence. That's when he noticed her. Near the back of the room, a young woman was quietly arranging flowers on one of the catering tables. She wore a simple black dress that clearly marked her as part of the serving staff. Her dark hair was pulled back, in a neat ponytail, and she moved with the kind of careful efficiency that came from years of working in rich people's homes. Something about the way she stood caught his attention. While everyone else was looking at him, she was focused on her work. But her hands had stopped moving, and he could see that she was listening to every word. "In fact," Alexander said, his voice taking on a cruel edge that he probably didn't even realize was there, "I'm so confident in this challenge that I'll extend it to everyone here tonight. And I mean everyone." His gaze locked onto the woman by the catering table. She looked up, probably feeling his stare, and their eyes met across the crowded room. "Even our lovely staff," he added with a smirk that made several guests chuckle. "After all, you never know where talent might be hiding." The woman's face flushed red, but she didn't look away. For a moment, Alexander thought he saw something flash in her eyes. Anger, maybe, or hurt. But it was gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "What do you say?" He called out to her directly now, his voice carrying across the room. "Care to try your luck at the piano? Who knows, you might just become the next Mrs. Cross." The laughter from his guests was louder now, and crueler. They found it hilarious that their host was mocking the help. This was the kind of entertainment they hadn't expected tonight. The woman, whose name was Sophia, felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but something deeper was stirring inside her chest. These people had no idea who she really was, what she had given up, or what she had lost. Without thinking, her fingers began to trace invisible piano keys on the edge of the table where she stood. It was an old habit, one she thought she had, broken years ago. But when she was nervous or upset, her hand still remembered. "Well?" Alexander pressed, clearly enjoying himself now. "Don't be shy. The piano doesn't bite." Sophia's hands stilled. She looked down at the flowers she had been arranging, beautiful white roses that probably cost more than she made in a week. Then she looked back up at Alexander, standing there in his $1,000 suit, surrounded by his wealthy friends who were all waiting to see what the poor cleaning girl would do. They had no idea that she had once played in concert halls. They didn't know that before life fell apart, before her mother got sick and her family needed money, she had been accepted to one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. They couldn't know that she still heard melodies in her head every single day, or that her fingers ached sometimes from missing the keys. The room was completely silent now. Even the catering staff had stopped what they were doing to watch. Everyone was waiting to see if the girl would run away in embarrassment, or if she would actually be foolish enough to approach the piano. Sophia set down the roses she had been holding. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. But as she looked at Alexander's mocking smile and listened to the barely contained laughter of his guests, something inside her snapped. She had been invisible for so long, just another piece of furniture in rich people's homes, someone to be ignored, overlooked, dismissed. But tonight, in front of all these people who thought they were better than her, she was going to remind herself of who she used to be. And maybe, just maybe, she was going to wipe that smug expression off Alexander Cross's face. Sophia took a deep breath, smoothed down her simple dress, and began walking toward the piano. Every step Sophia took toward the piano felt like walking through thick mud. The room had gone completely quiet, except for the clicking of her simple black shoes against the marble floor. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching her every move, waiting to see her fail. Some of the guests were already pulling out their phones, probably thinking this would make a funny video to share later. "Look at this," she imagined them saying. "Some cleaning lady actually thought she could play piano at Alexander Cross's party." Alexander stood by the piano with his arms crossed, that same cruel smile plastered on his face. He was clearly enjoying every second of this. In his mind, he had already won. The girl would sit down, hit a few random keys, and then run away in shame. Everyone would laugh, and he would be the hero of his own story once again. But as Sophia got closer to the piano, something strange started happening. Her nervousness began to fade away, replaced by something else entirely. It was like walking toward an old friend she hadn't seen in years. The piano was beautiful, probably worth more than most people's houses. Its black surface was so polished, she could see her reflection in it. For a moment, she just stood there looking down at the keys. "Having second thoughts?" Alexander asked loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. "No shame in backing down now. This isn't exactly your world, is it?" A few people laughed, but it was nervous laughter now. Something about the way Sophia was standing, the way she was looking at the piano, made them uncertain. Sophia didn't answer him. Instead, she slowly sat down on the piano bench and adjusted it to the right height. Her hands hovered over the keys for a moment, and she closed her eyes. Suddenly, she was 18 again, sitting in the practice room at the conservatory. Her teacher, Professor Chen, was standing behind her, telling her that she had a gift that came along maybe once in a generation. She remembered the acceptance letter to Juilliard that had arrived just 3 days before her mother's cancer diagnosis. She remembered folding that letter and putting it in a drawer, knowing she would never be able to use it. "Well?" Alexander's voice cut through her memories. "We don't have all night." Sophia opened her eyes and looked directly at him. "What piece would you like me to play?" she asked quietly. Alexander laughed out loud. "Oh, you're really going through with this? Fine, play whatever you want. Just make it quick so we can all get back to the real party." Sophia nodded and turned back to the piano, She thought about what to play. She could choose something simple, something safe. But these people had already made up their minds about who she was. They saw a cleaning lady, someone beneath them, someone who didn't matter. She decided to play Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was one of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written, the kind of music that could make grown men cry. She had learned it when she was 19, before her whole world fell apart. Sophia placed her fingers on the keys and took one last deep breath. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost questioning, like someone carefully opening a door to a room they hadn't entered in years. But even those first few notes were perfect, each one clear and precise. The conversation in the room stopped immediately. Someone near the back dropped their wine glass and it shattered against the floor. But nobody even turned to look. As the music grew more complex, Sophia's hands moved across the keys like they were dancing. Her fingers remembered every note, every tiny detail of the piece. It was like riding a bicycle. Her body had never forgotten, even after all these years. The music filled the enormous room, bouncing off the high ceilings and wrapping around everyone like a warm blanket. This wasn't just playing piano. This was something much deeper, much more powerful. Alexander's smile had completely disappeared. He stood frozen, staring at Sophia with his mouth slightly open. This wasn't possible. This was some girl who cleaned his house. She couldn't possibly play like this, but she could, and she was. The music grew more passionate, more intense. Sophia's whole body moved with the rhythm, her eyes closed, completely lost in the world she was creating with her hands. In the audience, people started to have reactions they hadn't expected. Mrs. Harrison, the wife of a famous banker, felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She couldn't understand why. It was just music. But somehow this music was reaching into her chest and touching something she had forgotten was there. Mr. Rodriguez, who owned a chain of restaurants, found himself thinking about his grandmother, who had died when he was 12. She used to play piano too, simple songs that had made him feel safe and loved. He hadn't thought about her in years. Even the catering staff had stopped working. They stood along the walls, completely mesmerized by what they were witnessing. As the piece moved toward its climax, Sophia's playing became even more powerful. Her hands flew across the keys with incredible speed and precision. This was music that demanded everything from the person playing it, and Sophia was giving everything she had. The guests weren't laughing anymore. They weren't thinking about their phones or their business deals or how much their jewelry cost. They were just listening, really listening. Maybe for the first time in years. Alexander felt something strange happening in his chest. It was like a tight knot that had been there for so long he had forgotten about it was finally starting to loosen. The music was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. It was honest in a way that made him uncomfortable. It reminded him of feelings he had buried under years of success and money and power. As the piece neared its end, Sophia's playing became gentler again, like she was carefully closing that door she had opened at the beginning. The final notes hung in the air for what felt like forever, and then there was complete silence. Sophia sat at the piano for a moment, her hands still resting on the keys. Then she slowly opened her eyes and turned to face the room. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They were all just staring at her like they had seen a ghost. Finally, someone in the back started clapping. Then someone else joined in. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in applause. But this wasn't polite party clapping. This was the kind of applause you heard at concert halls, loud and enthusiastic, and full of genuine appreciation. Sophia stood, up from the piano bench and smoothed down her dress. She looked directly at Alexander, who was still standing there in shock. "I played your piano, Mr. Cross," she said quietly, but her voice carried across the room. "And according to your promise made in front of all these witnesses, you'll marry me." Alexander opened his mouth, but no words came out. Sophia took a step closer to him. "But here's the thing," she continued, her voice getting stronger. "I wouldn't marry you if you were the last man on earth. A man who mocks people he thinks are beneath him, who makes promises he never intends to keep, who uses others for his entertainment. That's not the kind of man any woman should want. She turned and walked toward the door, her head held high. Just before she reached it, she paused and looked back at the room full of stunned, wealthy people. "Enjoy the rest of your party," she said. Then she walked out, leaving Alexander standing, alone by the piano, completely speechless. Alexander couldn't sleep. It had been 3 days since the party, and he kept replaying that moment over and over in his mind. The way Sophia had looked at him before she walked out. The way her words had cut through him like a knife. The way everyone had stared at him after she left like they were seeing him for the first time. He had tried to continue the party after she walked out, but it was no use. The magic was gone. People had stayed for another hour or so, but the conversations felt forced and awkward. Everyone kept glancing at the piano, and nobody seemed to know what to say. Now Alexander sat in his home office, staring at his computer screen. He had been trying to work, but his mind kept wandering. He found himself thinking about Sophia's hands as they moved across the piano keys. The way her whole body had seemed to come alive when she played. The passion in her voice when she had told him exactly what she thought of him. Nobody had ever spoken to him like that before. In his world, people said what they thought he wanted to hear. They laughed at his jokes, agreed with his opinions, and told him how brilliant he was. But Sophia had looked him straight in the eye and told him the truth about himself. The worst part was that she was right. Alexander picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Rebecca, I need you to find someone for me," he said. "Of course, Mr. Cross." "What's the name?" "That's the problem. I don't know her last name. Her first name is Sophia. She was working at the party on Saturday night. Catering staff." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Sir, you want me to track down one of the servers from Saturday?" "Yes, I need to find her." Another pause. "May I ask why?" Alexander hesitated. How could he explain this? That he hadn't been able to think about anything else for 3 days. That her words had shaken him more than any business deal or financial loss ever had. "Just find her," he said finally. "Use whatever resources you need." It took Rebecca 2 days, but she finally called back with information. "Her name is Sophia Martinez," she said. "She's 28 years old. She quit her job with the catering company the day after your party. No forwarding address." "There has to be more," Alexander insisted. "I'm still working on it, sir, but it's like she just disappeared." Alexander hung up the phone, frustrated. How could someone just vanish in this day and age? Everyone left a digital trail. Everyone had social media accounts and credit card records and phone bills. But apparently Sophia Martinez was different. He tried to focus on work, but his concentration was shot. During a board meeting about their latest software launch, he found himself doodling piano keys on his notepad. His business partners were discussing profit margins, and all he could think about was the way Sophia's music had made him feel. That weekend, Alexander did something he hadn't done in years. He went for a walk in the city, no destination in mind. He found himself in neighborhoods he had never bothered to visit before, places where normal people lived and worked. He passed a small music school tucked between a laundromat and a corner grocery store. The sign out front was faded and weathered. Harmony Music Academy, piano lessons for all ages. Through the window, he could see a group of children sitting at old keyboards, their fingers struggling to find the right notes, without really knowing why. Alexander pushed open the door and walked inside. The interior was nothing like the fancy music schools he had seen in the wealthy part of town. The carpet was worn, the walls needed paint, and the instruments looked like they had seen better days. But there was something warm about the place, something that reminded him of the feeling Sophia's music had created. "Can I help you?" asked an elderly woman behind the front desk. "I was just curious about the school," Alexander said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "Are you interested in lessons for yourself or a child?" Alexander was about to say he was just looking when he heard it. Piano music coming from one of the back rooms. Not the hesitant plinking of a beginner, but real music. Beautiful music. His heart started beating faster. Could it be? "Who's playing?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Oh, that's Sophia, the woman said with a smile. She's our newest teacher, absolutely wonderful with the children. And talented? You should hear her play Chopin. Alexander felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Sophia? Yes, Sophia Martinez. She just started working here a few days ago. Such a sweet girl. And so patient with the kids even though most of them can barely afford lessons. The music stopped, and Alexander heard a door opening somewhere in the back of the building. Panic filled his chest. He wasn't ready for this. He didn't know what he would say if he saw her. I have to go, he said quickly, and practically ran out of the building. But he couldn't stay away. The next day, he found himself parked across the street from the music school, watching through the windows. He saw Sophia arrive for work, carrying a worn leather bag and wearing a simple blue dress. She looked different than she had at the party, more relaxed, happier. Through the window, he watched her teach a lesson to a little boy who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She was incredibly patient, guiding his small hands to the right keys, encouraging him when he made mistakes. When the boy finally played a simple melody correctly, Sophia's face lit up with genuine joy. Alexander realized he had never seen anyone look that happy about someone else's success. For the next week, he came back every day. He told himself he was just curious that he would leave her alone. But he couldn't stop watching. He saw her stay late to help students who were struggling. He saw her donate her own money when a family couldn't afford to pay for lessons. He saw her repair broken keyboards with her own hands because the school couldn't afford to hire someone. One evening, as Sophia was locking up the school, Alexander finally worked up the courage to approach her. He got out of his car and started walking across the street. But Sophia saw him coming. She stopped, her keys still in her hand, and just stood there watching him approach. When he was about 10 feet away, she spoke. "What do you want, Mr. Cross?" Her voice was calm, but he could hear the wariness in it. "I wanted to apologize," he said. "For what? The way you humiliated me at your party? Or the way you've been stalking me for the past week?" Alexander felt his face turn red. "You knew I was there?" A man in a $1,000 suit sitting in a brand new luxury car outside a rundown music school? Yeah, I noticed. Sophia turned back to the door and finished locking it. "What do you really want?" "I want to understand," Alexander said honestly. "I want to understand how someone like you, with that much talent, ends up working as..." He stopped. Himself. As what? As a cleaner? As someone beneath you? "That's not what I meant." Sophia turned to face him fully. "That's exactly what you meant. You can't understand how someone with talent could end up poor. You think talent is supposed to guarantee success, right? You think if someone is really good at something, they'll automatically end up rich and famous." She started walking down the street, and Alexander followed her. "Let me tell you something about the real world, Mr. Cross," Sophia continued. "Talent doesn't pay for your mother's cancer treatments. Talent doesn't put food on the table when your father dies and leaves you with 2 younger brothers to raise. Talent doesn't matter when you have to choose between your dreams and your family's survival." Alexander walked beside her in silence, absorbing every word. "I was supposed to go to Juilliard," Sophia said quietly. "Full scholarship. I was going to be a concert pianist, but life had other plans." They had reached the bus stop. Sophia turned to look at him one more time. "So now you know my story, Mr. Cross. Are you satisfied? Can you go back to your mansion and your wealthy friends and forget about the cleaning lady who dared to embarrass you at your party?" The bus arrived before Alexander could answer. Sophia got on without looking back, leaving him standing alone on the sidewalk, finally beginning to understand the difference between success and strength. Alexander stood at the bus stop long after Sophia's bus had disappeared into the evening traffic. Her words kept echoing in his head. Juilliard, full scholarship, a concert pianist's career thrown away to take care of her family. He had never really thought about sacrifice before. In his world, if you wanted something, you bought it. If you had a problem, you hired someone to fix it. The idea that someone might have to choose between their dreams and their family's survival was completely foreign to him. That night, Alexander couldn't eat dinner. He sat in his enormous dining room looking at the table that could seat 20 people, and all he could think about was Sophia teaching those children on broken keyboards. The next morning, he called his assistant. "Rebecca, I need you to set up a meeting with the board of the Cross Foundation." The Cross Foundation was Alexander's charity organization, the one that was supposed to help underprivileged children get better education. If he was being honest, he had mostly ignored it for the past few years. It was run by other people, and he just signed the checks and showed up for the fancy fundraising dinners. "What's the meeting about, sir?" Rebecca asked. "Education funding, specifically music education in low-income areas." There was a pause. "Sir, are you feeling all right? You've never shown interest in the actual programs before." Alexander almost smiled. Even his own assistant knew he had been a terrible person. "Just set up the meeting, Rebecca." 3 days later, Alexander sat in the foundation's conference room, listening to reports about their current programs. The numbers were depressing. Most schools in poor neighborhoods had cut their music programs years ago due to budget constraints. The few that still existed were operating on almost nothing. What would it cost to properly fund music programs in, say, 10 schools? Alexander asked. The foundation director, an older woman named Patricia, looked surprised. "Well, that would depend on what you mean by properly fund. Basic instruments, qualified teachers, maintenance, everything. The best instruments, the best teachers, scholarships for talented students who can't afford private lessons." Patricia pulled out her calculator and started working. After a few minutes, she looked up. "For 10 schools, about $2 million per year." Alexander nodded. $2 million. He spent more than that on his cars. "Do it," he said. "Sir, fund it. Start with the schools in the downtown area. I want full music programs, new instruments, qualified teachers, and I want it done anonymously." Patricia stared at him. "Anonymous? But sir, this would be great publicity for the company." "Anonymous," Alexander repeated firmly. "No one needs to know where the money is coming from." After the meeting, Alexander drove to the music school where Sophia worked. But this time, he didn't park across the street. He walked right up to the front door and went inside. The same elderly woman was at the front desk. She looked up and smiled. "Oh, you're back. Did you decide about lessons?" "Actually, I was wondering if I could speak to Sophia Martinez." The woman's expression changed slightly. "Are you a friend of hers?" "Not exactly. I'm someone who owes her an apology." Before the woman could respond, a door opened and Sophia walked out, leading a group of young children. She stopped when she saw Alexander and her expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I wanted to talk to you." "We already talked. You got your answers. Now please leave." The children were looking back and forth between Sophia and Alexander, sensing the tension but not understanding it. "Please," Alexander said quietly. "Just 5 minutes." Sophia looked at him for a long moment, then turned to the children. "Why don't you all go practice your scales in room 2? I'll be right there." After the children had left, Sophia crossed her arms and waited. "I've been thinking about what you said," Alexander began, "about talent not guaranteeing success, about having to choose between dreams and family." "Good for you," Sophia said coldly. "I want to help." Sophia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Help? How exactly do you want to help? Are you going to travel back in time and pay for my mother's medical bills? Are you going to bring my father back so I don't have to support my brothers?" "I can't change the past," Alexander said. "But maybe I can help change the future, for other kids who are in the same situation you were in." He told her about the foundation funding, about the 10 schools that would soon have full music programs. Sophia listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. "Why?" she asked when he finished. "Because you were right. I didn't understand. I thought success was just about talent and hard work. I never realized how many barriers some people face that others never even see." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "And you think throwing money at the problem will fix everything?" "No," Alexander said honestly. "But it's a start. And I was hoping you might help me understand how to do it right. What do you mean? The foundation needs someone to oversee the music programs. Someone who understands what these kids need. Someone who's been where they are. Alexander took a deep breath. I want to offer you the job. Sophia stared at him. You want to hire me? Yes. Full-time position, good salary, benefits. You'd be in charge of designing and implementing music education programs for underprivileged children across the city. And what's the catch? No catch. You'd report to the foundation board, not to me. You'd have complete autonomy over how the programs are run. Sophia shook her head. I don't believe this. 3 weeks ago, you were mocking me at your party. Now you want to give me a job. 3 weeks ago, I was an arrogant fool who thought money made me better than everyone else. Meeting you changed that. People don't change that fast, Sophia said. Maybe not completely, but they can start to change. They can start to see things differently. One of the children poked her head out of room 2. Miss Sophia, Tommy is playing the wrong notes again. Sophia sighed. I'll be right there, sweetie. She turned back to Alexander. I need to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need. As Alexander turned to leave, Sophia called after him. Alexander. He stopped and looked back. It was the first time she had used his first name. Why does it matter to you what I think? She asked. You're rich and successful. You could have any woman you want. Why do you care about the opinion of someone you barely know? Alexander was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer honestly. Because in all my 32 years, no one has ever been brave enough to tell me the truth about myself. Everyone just tells me what they think I want to hear. But you looked me in the eye and told me exactly who I was, even when it meant risking your job and your dignity. He paused, then continued. And because when you played that piano, it was the first time in years that I felt something real, something that wasn't about money or business or success. It was just beautiful, pure. And I realized that's what's been missing from my life. Sophia didn't say anything, but something in her expression softened slightly. Think about the job offer, Alexander said. But more than that, think about all the kids who could benefit from programs like this. Kids who have the same talent you had, but who might not have to choose between their dreams and their families. He left the music school feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not hope that Sophia would forgive him or agree to work with him, but hope that maybe he could become the kind of person who deserved forgiveness. For the first time in his life, Alexander Cross was more interested in who he could become than in who he had always been. 2 weeks passed before Sophia called Alexander back. He had been checking his phone constantly, jumping every time it rang. His business partners had started to notice that he was distracted during meetings, but he didn't care. Nothing seemed as important as waiting for her answer. When she finally called, her voice was different, less cold but still careful. I'll take the job, she said, but I have conditions. Whatever you need, Alexander replied immediately. First, I want to visit every school before we implement any programs. I need to talk to the teachers, the students, the families. I want to understand what each community actually needs, not what we think they need. Agreed. Second, I want guarantees that this funding will continue for at least 5 years. These kids need stability, not a rich man's hobby that disappears when he gets bored. Alexander felt the sting of her words, but he knew he deserved. At 5 years minimum, I'll put it in writing. And third, Sophia continued, I don't want any special treatment because of what happened between us. This is about the children, not about your guilt or whatever you think you owe me. Understood? There was a pause. Okay then. When do I start? Sophia threw herself into the work with an intensity that amazed everyone at the foundation. She visited all 10 schools in the first month, spending hours talking to teachers and students. She sat in on music classes, helped repair broken instruments, and even taught impromptu lessons when regular teachers were sick. Alexander found excuses to check on the programs, telling himself it was just good business practice. But really, He wanted to see Sophia in action. Watching her work was like watching an artist create a masterpiece. At Roosevelt Elementary, she convinced a shy 12-year-old girl named Anna to try singing in front of the class. When Anna's voice filled the room, clear and beautiful, Sophia's eyes filled with tears of joy. At Washington Middle School, she organized a student concert where parents who worked 3 jobs found time to come hear their children play simple melodies on donated keyboards. At Lincoln High School, she discovered a teenage boy named Carlos who had been skipping classes to work part-time jobs to help his family. Sophia arranged for him to receive a scholarship that would let him focus on his studies and his incredible guitar talent. Alexander watched all of this from a distance, but Sophia barely acknowledged his presence during these visits. She was polite, but professional, treating him exactly like she would treat any other foundation board member. One evening, 4 months after Sophia had started working for the foundation, Alexander was leaving the office late when he heard piano music coming. From the conference room, he followed the sound and found Sophia sitting at the small upright piano they had recently purchased for presentations. She was playing the same Chopin piece she had played at his party, but this time it sounded different, less angry, more hopeful. When she finished, she noticed him standing in the doorway. "Sorry," she said, starting to stand up. "I didn't know anyone was still here. I just needed to practice for the student recital tomorrow." "Don't apologize," Alexander said. "It was beautiful, different from how you played it before." Sophia looked at him for a moment, then sat back down at the piano. "Music changes depending on how you're feeling when you play it. That night at your party, I was angry and hurt. Tonight," she shrugged, "tonight I'm thinking about all the kids who will get to discover music because of these programs." Alexander walked into the room and sat down in one of the chairs facing the piano. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia nodded. "Do you ever regret it? Not going to Juilliard, I mean. Not becoming a concert pianist." Sophia was quiet for a long time, her fingers absently playing soft chords. "I used to," she said finally. "For years I was angry about it. I felt like life had cheated me out of my dreams. And now I realize that maybe my dream was too small." She gestured toward the wall where photos from the school programs were displayed. "A concert pianist performs for hundreds of people at a time. But through these programs, I'm helping hundreds of children discover their own musical abilities. Some of them might become professional musicians. Others will just find joy in music for the rest of their lives. Either way, I'm part of something bigger than just my own career." Alexander felt something shift in his chest. "You're remarkable, you know that?" Sophia looked at him with surprise. "I'm just doing my job." "No, you're changing lives. You're giving these kids opportunities they never would have had. You're showing them that their dreams matter." "We're doing that," Sophia corrected. "The foundation, the schools, the teachers. It's not just me." Alexander stood up and walked over to the piano. "Can I tell you something? Before I met you, I thought success meant having more money than everyone else, owning bigger houses, driving faster cars. I thought the point of life was to win." He sat down on the piano bench next to her, careful to leave some space between them. "But watching you work these past few months, seeing how happy you get when one of these kids plays their first song correctly, I've realized I had it all wrong. Success isn't about what you can take from the world. It's about what you can give back." Sophia turned to look at him. "And what are you going to do with that realization?" "I don't know yet," Alexander admitted. "But I want to learn. I want to understand how to use what I have to actually help people, not just write checks and feel good about myself." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "The student recital is tomorrow night," Sophia said. "You should come. Not as the foundation's benefactor, but just as someone who wants to hear beautiful music." Alexander smiled. "I'd like that." The next evening, Alexander arrived at Roosevelt Elementary's small auditorium. Instead of sitting in the front row where a seat had been reserved for him, he chose a spot in the back, next to parents and siblings who had come to support the young performers. As the children took turns playing simple pieces on piano, violin, and guitar, Alexander found himself thinking about Sophia's words. She was right. This was better than any concert hall performance he had ever attended. These weren't polished professionals playing for money. These were children sharing something they loved, something they had worked hard to learn. When the recital ended, Alexander made his way backstage to congratulate the students. He found Sophia helping a nervous young boy pack up his violin. "You did great tonight, Miguel," she was saying. "Your parents looked so proud." The boy beamed and ran, off to find his family. Sophia turned and saw Alexander. "What did you think?" "I think," Alexander said slowly, "that this is the first time I've been to a musical performance where I wasn't checking my phone or thinking about business deals. These kids, they reminded me what it feels like to love something just for the joy of it." Sophia smiled, and for the first time since he had known her, it was a completely genuine smile with no guardedness behind it. "You know," she said, "we have openings in our adult beginner classes. If you're really serious about learning to appreciate music instead of just owning it." Alexander laughed. "Are you offering to teach me piano, Sofia Martinez?" "I'm offering to teach you how to listen," she replied. "To music, to people, to the world around you. The piano is just a tool." Alexander thought about the arrogant man who had stood at that party 6 months ago, mocking a woman whose talent and character far exceeded his own. That man felt like a stranger now. "When do we start?" he asked. Sophia's smile grew wider. "How? About right now?" She led him back to the piano in the empty auditorium. As she placed his hands on the keys for his first lesson, Alexander realized that sometimes the most beautiful music comes not from perfect technique, but from the willingness to learn something new. And sometimes the best partnerships begin, not with a challenge or a promise, but with two people sitting side by side, ready to create something beautiful together.